Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic, let's do it. What's the most eerie thing that you've ever seen, but no one believes you? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was on the scene of a 4-car collision that was caused by a drunk driver. There were several serious injuries, and my dad and I were helping tend to people until help came. I got to the main vehicle that had caused the accident and was so close that my hands were on the passenger door. The window was gone, and I leaned in. I leaned in because there was no one in the car. I kept looking, and there was no one. I'll swear to this day that no one was in that car. I could see the inside, destroyed and empty and full of containers of alcohol, but nothing else. I leaned back and looked at my dad, and he shook his head at me as if to say, "Don't look." The newspaper article the next day reported that the driver and his niece and nephew were all killed in that car, and that they did not have their seatbelts on. I know there are stories of people's own brain blocking out things like this, but I kept looking, trying to see in that moment, and even today I can't understand it. It was late at night and I couldn't sleep. I decided to go out to look at the stars to get sleepy. When I went to close the door, I heard a huge bang like something big was falling coming from outside the flat behind my door. I went with caution and looked through the little hole of the door to see what was happening. I saw two people just standing there outside the lift, one of them holding something. I couldn't tell what it was, but they didn't seem friendly. I looked some more, and then it was when I saw that there was a person beside them on the floor, not moving or seemingly breathing. I heard them saying something to one another. I didn't really catch what, though, before they started dragging the person on the floor out of the flat and into a van before speeding off like crazy. I tried to tell my family, but they just said it was just a nightmare. I know what I saw. When I was a kid, 11 or 12 or so, I was spending the night with a friend. Of course, when it was bedtime, we didn't go to sleep like we were supposed to. We were just laying there talking, when a man opened the door and looked around. He was a tall white male wearing only his jeans and was clean shaven with short hair. Of course, we acted like we were asleep. When he closed the door, we started talking about how we were surprised that her dad had shaved the beard he'd had for so long. However, the next morning at breakfast, her dad still had his beard. We both saw it, so it wasn't a dream. Her parents thought we made it up, but why? Was staying the night with a friend one time, and I woke up earlier than anyone, so I went to the living room and watched some TV. About an hour into it, I was overcome by this horrible feeling I could never describe, and I looked beside me, and there was a shadowy figure standing next to the chair I was sitting in, bent over with its face about 2 feet away with mine. I utterly froze in place and slammed my eyes shut. I sat there for what seemed like hours until my friend's dad came walking into the living room and found me in the chair breathing heavily and sweating. He called my name and gave me the strength to open my eyes and run over to him. 2 of them for me. One as a kid, we lived in this smallish town and our house was pretty close to one of those huge sluices next to a large canal. However, the embankment was pretty high, so apart from the normal road, there was a small stone staircase that went up from our street directly onto the embankment. The sluice itself, however, was always used by druggies and illegal parties, etc. Not a big deal 99% of the time, since the houses below were never bothered. Cue me, being 13, coming back home from a sports training, and I see this shape at the bottom of the stone staircase with a massive splatter of red around its head. Turns out, one of the druggies, while high as a kite, fell down the steps and ended up falling right on his head, splitting his skull and spread most of his viscera across the street. Had to tell my parents, and they called the police. Second one is from not that long ago when I was coming home from my internship at a research center or hospital, and since I used public traffic, had to get off at a station to take a different train. While waiting at the platform, the lady or girl in front of me suddenly jumped in front of the train, resulting in something I can only unfortunately describe as meat confetti. Afterwards called up my girlfriend, who I was living with at the time, still do, to explain that I wouldn't be able to get home since someone jumped in front of the train. Now in the Netherlands, it's not uncommon to have delays in the entire train system due to these events. Apparently, I didn't sound overly emotional or anything, shock. So she just assumed that somewhere on a different platform, someone jumped in front of the train so my train couldn't leave. So she went to her martial arts lesson, and I was absolutely stunned that someone so close to you could be so casual about such an event happening to a loved one. When I finally did end up getting home, basically broke down. And it was only when calling her again that she understood what had actually happened and immediately rushed home. Only later learned that the girl turned out to be a 19-year-old student with severe psychosis and mental issues from a coworker, fellow intern, who knew her from the school she was attending. One night driving home from work, a possum was crossing the road and I let it pass. As the possum climbed a small incline that met the shoulder, my headlights shone on it, and I saw the possum had babies on its back. There was also a dead possum on the shoulder, a victim of roadkill. Only one baby possum was turned around, still facing the shoulder of the road. It was only for a fraction of a second, but I'll never forget the illuminated, wide-eyed look of horror on the baby possum's face as it just stared at its dead kin. It was as if it was the first time this possum had witnessed a dead member of its own kind, as if it had just realized the mortality of its own life. It was too human of an expression. In June 2012, I saw a plane crash in the Nevada desert. I was installing road closed markers in Quinn Canyon about 150 miles north of Las Vegas. A KC-135 tanker was circling far to the south with 3 small single-engine jets trailing behind. This was not unusual. A refueling wing flew out of Nellis Air Force Base, and we'd see one fly overhead about once a week, often refueling F-15s headed for Dugway. As I was watching, one of the contrails from the smaller jets suddenly cut out, and I could see the aircraft glint in the sunlight as it tumbled from the sky. I did not see the crash itself. The falling plane disappeared behind a distant mountain. I assume it crashed far to the south, somewhere in the test range. There was no notice in the media. Flying over Calgary, Canada, on an international flight 30,000 plus feet, staring out the window and saw in the distance a round white object. It seemed to have 4 jet engines pointing downward that saw slowly rotating around it. Friends sat next to me saw it as well. It disappeared behind the wing, and as we waited for it to appear on the other side, it was gone. Asked the pilot what it was as we left the plane, and he looked at me like I was an idiot. Stopped telling people about it, and now everyone just rolls their eyes. Not saying it was aliens or anything, but for weeks I searched online to try and get some kind of idea of what it was, and nothing. 2 of them for me. One was when I was around 9, walking with my friend from her place to my place. Our places were like a 10-minute walk apart. Some grown bald guy in all black with sunglasses on started following us. After 2 minutes of him following us, we just kinda started crossing the street, walking to another street, etc. This dude kept following us, and every time we looked behind us, he kept pretending to be checking the soles of his shoes, like he stepped in dog poop. He was super close to us the whole time, so we just ran. Got to my place and we both started crying. We had an active imagination, so my mom questioned us if it was actually 100% true. And when we said yes, she called the police. They took a statement, but nothing came of it. A few years later in the news, they were looking for a child molester, and the face sketch looked exactly the same. Exactly. Another time, I was like 14 and at an airport with my family. I spaced out while watching the board with scrolling text and had one of those moments where you sort of hallucinate or daydream something happening. I 100% legit thought that the scrolling text changed from flight info to "you will have no choice but to watch something gruesome appear." Some Final Destination shit that was. When I was 3, I was playing with my brother on a pier. My parents stopped looking after us for a moment because I guess no one can stay vigilant non-stop. So with my brother, we started playing climbing into boats and jumping from one to another, and of course, because I was very small, I missed, fell into the water and almost drowned. My father suddenly remembered that he had children just in time to come back on the pier and see me fall into the water and ran to fish me out. The story is my very first memory. I don't remember everything, but I remember the hand coming down to grab me. What I can't explain is that I also clearly remember a woman with green hair trying to pull me into the deep. It wasn't something I saw, but rather something I heard. I was putting my 4-year-old son to sleep for the night. I had just finished reading to him, and he had already dozed off, so I just laid there in his bed for a little while. I heard his pull-string Woody doll go off. It was laying on the floor next to the bed. It said, "Boy, am I glad to see you." For those who don't know, the Woody doll is like the doll from the movie. He has a few little sayings, and he says a different one every time you pull the string. It startled me, but I didn't think too much of it. I figured a string had gotten snagged up on something. I was just about to get out of bed when he did it again. not a different saying either. It said, "Boy, am I glad to see you," again, twice in a row, which doesn't happen. He says a few different sayings, but always in the same order. This time I picked it up, took a long look at the string, and saw that it wasn't snagged on anything. I was holding it in my hand, about to set it back down, and when again, "Boy, am I glad to see you." That freaked me out a lot. It didn't help that I was home alone with my sleeping kid. I literally looked the doll in the face and said out loud, "Okay, you're freaking me out, Wood," and dropped it. He stopped after that. We still have Woody. He's never done anything weird since. If you pull a string, he says all of his sayings in the correct order. Everyone shrugs off my Woody experience, but it was really creepy. Don't F with cowboys. I was like 12 and no one but me and my dog were in my apartment. I was listening to my music with my dog on my bed and my room closed. My door had a see-through glass part on the head part of the door. My dog started barking really loudly, and I brushed it off as him hearing my neighbors that were loud usually. But when he got up to bark at the door, it gave me a bad feeling inside my chest, so I patted him on the head, waiting for him to calm down. 10 minutes pass. He lays down next to my bed, calm. And then another 10 minutes pass, and I continue listening to music when my dog curled up growling, but in a scared way this time, turning his head on the door, and I looked up at the top of the clear door part way and saw a lady full white, and that sounds cliche, but her hair was white, and so was her dress and skin. She passed to the room next to mine really fast. I didn't see her face, but it scared me shitless. No one believes me, but I did see her. And I didn't leave my room then. I just crawled up under my blanket with my dog close to me. I haven't seen her since, and now I moved, but it was really weird. I recall as a younger child hearing a lady inside those walls singing, and Mom said it was the pipes, probably, but the melody of the noise didn't sound like a pipe. I'm not sure if this counts, but when I was a freshman in high school, we traveled all over for my dad's job. One year, we were on our way back home and stopped overnight, and I woke up multiple times throughout the night feeling weird. Then I suddenly woke up and had the strangest urge to look out the window. The only window, of course, was in the bedroom part of the hotel room we were in, and that's where my parents were sleeping. I remember getting up and standing at their door for 15 minutes, fighting with myself to go lay back down and forget it. I finally laid down and convinced myself that I was okay. Then the next morning, we found out the trailer was stolen with all our personal belongings, social security cards, savings, etc. gone. And the time frame on the surveillance video was the same time I was awake and decided to look or not. Not only that, but they circled the car multiple times apparently, and each time I was awake. I listen to that eerie feeling now because it always tells the truth. I've known we'd get into car crashes, screwed over, or injured minutes before it happened. Now people actually listen when I say I feel weird about a situation or person. Okay, so once many years ago when I was a teenager, getting high and drunk and whatnot, I was leaving my cousin's apartment late at night. I always walked home late as F, but anyway, they lived on the top floor, and as I started to descend the bottom of the stairs, I see this little toy Jeep, the kind that kids ride, the battery-operated ones. It was always out there along with bikes and other toys for the other kids that lived there. Well, anyway, I swear to God, as I get to the bottom, and from the angle of the stairs, I only caught a glimpse of the Jeep, but I see enough to see that the front of the little Jeep is slowly moving in a circle, almost as if someone was pushing it around and around. Now to this day, I tell myself that I was probably drunk and high, and that I just imagined it, and honestly, that's probably what it was. But it felt so real. I remember I stood there for a few seconds, and then I turned around and ran back up the stairs. I went back inside and told everyone about the little Jeep. Obviously, no one believed me, and even now, I had started smoking. I didn't believe it myself. So right around the time my mom had just passed away, I had started smoking, drinking, and doing drugs. There was a lot of negativity around my life at the time, so maybe it was some negative energy or even the devil playing tricks with my mind, but regardless of what it was, it scared the shit out of me. If anyone bothers to read this, then you'll probably say it wasn't shit, or that I'm lying, but I'll let you believe what you will. Basically, to all these stories, you believe and feel and know that you saw something, and whether or not people believe it or not really shouldn't affect how it made you feel. It could be a little bit of imagination, a little bit of fear, and maybe a little bit real. I was a kid, either a tween or in my early teens, obviously still living in my parents' apartment on the fourth floor of a residential building in a quiet neighborhood. It was late at night, maybe 11ish, and overall pretty dark. I was trying to fall asleep, unsuccessfully, when suddenly the entire room lit up, and I'm not talking accidentally turned on my lights level, I'm talking shining a spotlight straight into my window level. The room was engulfed in white light for a few seconds. I could see as clearly as during the day. Then it was gone. Just like that. Freaked the shit out of me. And to say this day I have never or any idea what happened. None of these explanations I've come up with seem reasonable or satisfactory. I saw two ghosts in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina in January of 2013. My then girlfriend, now wife, and I were attending a wedding reception on a big house right on the beach. There was about 100 yards separating the house from the ocean. It was around 11 p.m. We decided we wanted to dip our feet in the water, as it would be fun and romantic. We walked from the house directly toward the water's edge in a straight line. It took us maybe a minute or two, and there was enough light from the moon and surrounding homes to see where we were going. All of a sudden, two people appeared in front of us. Not shadows, not misty figures, but two human bodies with depth and mass. My wife said to them, "Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't see you there. We'll walk elsewhere," or something along those lines. We walked away a few yards and then looked at each other kind of puzzled. How were we walking this whole time and we never saw those two people? We never would have just walked up to two random people in a dark, deserted beach, but apparently we did. Of course, we looked back and then no one was there. It creeped us the hell out. I feel like we looked back and there was nothing there, such a cliche ghost storyline, but that is exactly what happened. I know what we saw that night. My wife and I are two boring suburbanites. Making up stories like this isn't our thing. Fast forward to a few months after this happened. I'm at a different wedding, speaking with someone who lives in the Wrightsville Beach area. I begin to tell them the story before I'm interrupted and my aunt tells me, wait, let me guess. You saw a man and a woman standing on the beach. I said, yes. My aunt, who again is a very reasonable person who isn't in the business of making up silly ghost stories, essentially tells me that a lot of people who have been on that same area beach have reported a story similar to this. Whatever we saw that night is very well known to that area.